Hi, Clutter Fairy fans. This is the Clutter Fairy Weekly for October 22nd, 2024. I'm your co-host, Ed Gumnick, and I'm speaking with Gayle Goddard, certified professional organizer and owner of the Clutter Fairy in Houston, Texas.
Hi, everybody. The Clutter Fairy Weekly is the webcast and podcast that digs deep into the clutter that piles up between you and the life that you want to be living. We explore the habits and behaviors that lead to clutter, and we suggest strategies to slow the accumulation, reduce the collection, and comfortably manage the stuff we decide to keep.
If you're new to our Zoom meeting, we want to let you know that you can share your questions and comments via the chat, and I'll try to make sure Gayle addresses them before we move on to another topic. We're also streaming the webcast live on Facebook, so you can share your questions and comments there, and I'll share them with Gayle. Before we get to last week's tittle, Gayle, I understand that you have some sad news to share this week.
I do. I do. My favorite client of many years passed away last Sunday night. I work with other family members and will continue to work with his daughter to process his estate, so I can't break his anonymity. Suffice it to say, he was the coolest old guy ever, and he never failed to thank me and tell me that he appreciated my help with his work. He was an unusual client in that I acted as his alter ego in his business online. At 89, computers and smartphones confounded him totally, and I acted in his stead, doing everything online needed to handle his business dealings. He's been a twice-a-week client for many years now, and I'm going to miss him so much. It'll be a huge change in my business life without him in my client rotation every week. So I want to dedicate today's webcast to his memory and wish him endless fun on his journey.
Thanks for that. So sorry for the loss.
Thank you. I'm going to miss him terribly.
Okay, we're going to start as we usually do by following up on last week's weekly tittle, which was called Trial Downsize. The assignment was to survey your space through a downsizing lens to look for opportunities to reduce clutter. Let's hear from our participants in Zoom and on Facebook. Who evaluated your home with a downsizing eye this week? Please let us know in the comments. Gayle, your recent move was from one house of a certain size to a similar sized house than you were previously living in. But did you have to make any downsizing choices in this move because of the different way that the rooms and spaces are configured?
I actually did. The room layout in the new house is completely different in that it has a open great room concept. So the living room and the dining room and the kitchen are all open together. And so I gave away a bunch of large pieces of furniture that just don't make sense in the great room. And I had to set up the bead studio in a completely different way also. It's actually split between two rooms now. So it used to be all out in one half of the living room, but without all those walls, I couldn't set it up the same way in the new place. And so it's actually split between two rooms. I lost space for a bunch of bookshelves since a whole bunch of the walls are gone. So there's currently 5 bookshelves in the garage waiting to be set up in the garage or to be donated away. It really upset the apple cart that was my house before. It feels like a bunch of separate rooms kind of melted together, and it changed my needs all over the place. Everything is very different now. And I did have to go through the process of making some furniture go away, and the furniture that felt absolutely necessary in the old house became completely useless in the new house. And it was a very strange experience to go, yeah, there's really no place to put those bookshelves. You should just leave them in the garage. Like the movers were trying to bring them in the house, and I'm like, no, go straight back out with them. Do not bring them in. So every house has its own unique layout and it has its own unique needs. And yeah, my life changed a lot. My living space changed a lot, even though it's the same square footage.
So are just the shelves staying in the garage, or are some of your books going to have to stay in the garage?
No, actually, I got rid of almost all of the books that I had kept in the bedroom. And I have some bead books, but I got rid of a lot of those. And I mean, I had already pared down the books prior to moving to that house. But this time around, I just was like, gone. It's gone.
You were brutal.
Yes, I was very brutal. So I have some small stuff, but the new house has one end of the great room has built-ins in it. And so I will end up putting what books I kept on the built-ins. And
Gotcha.
I don't think I'll need more than 3 shelves to do it. So Like just the fact that there's built-ins at the end of the living room, like one end has a fireplace, the other end has this whole wall of built-ins, and just the fact that that appeared made all of my bookshelves sort of extra. Like they just weren't necessary. So I have one in the bead slash office room, and I have one in the guest room right now. And those are the only two I brought in the house, and the rest of them are all in the garage. So I was reluctant to give bookshelves away just because they're, good storage if you need them.
Hmm.
So I think I wanted to wait to see if I might need one more in the house somewhere. But right now, I don't think so. I think they'll end up being my garage. There wasn't a lot of storage in the garage, and so they're going to end up being my garage storage, basically.
Gotcha. Gotcha. That makes sense. M commented, open concept scares me from my experience living in a trailer. The place looked like a wreck if a hanky was out of place. Are you struggling with that at all, or is it still too early in the unpacking?
It's still too early, and I'm going slower because my knee is so dysfunctional at the moment. But yeah, I mean, it's going to have to be like that whole, like when you walk in the front door, there's my house. Like you're
Right.
looking at all of it. So, it's definitely something that um it's going to require me to maintain it regularly to have it to make it be worthy for people to walk in.
Right.
And and I'm not bad about that. I don't have much trouble with that. And my parameters are basically if somebody's suddenly coming over and I can pick it up within 30 minutes to be appropriate for somebody to come, then I'm good. And
Yeah.
so that will be my ultimate goal. I mean, I know I live there and I'm going to have a bunch of stuff around, but I should be able to get it to a place where I can clean it up in 30 minutes and be done.
Be ready for company.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I'm aiming for.
Rowan reports downsizing. I removed two tower fans that were too large for the room and replaced it with them with one smaller, not tower fan.
There you go. That's you right sizing for the new room, which is excellent. I talk about that a lot. What worked in a big house doesn't work in a small house. What worked in a big room doesn't work in a small room. And so you have to make those adjustments. Even though you love the stuff that's in your large house, if you're not going to stay in the large house, you got to find stuff that you love in the small house instead. So you have to let things go. Downsizing, right sizing your furniture is excellent.
Jane says a friend is in an apartment in a continuous care facility. For the past several years, I've based my larger purchases using the visualization of that small footprint.
Ooh, what a good reference point. That's excellent. So you can see how much space is being allotted. It's sort of like a dorm room at that point. If you've ever been in a facility like that where someone is being allotted a assisted living apartment, you can't. There are some that are for couples that are larger that maybe have two bedrooms, but generally they're one bedroom or they're studio apartments where everything's in one room and they're small and it's not a place where you can recreate a prior house. It's totally living on a different scale in a different way. And so what a great way to have that visual in your head so you can think about where would it go in that one room if I was living in that one room. I think that's an excellent reference.
All right, let's get on to our main topic because we have a lot of stuff prepared to discuss. Many of us approach organizing projects with our heads full of myths, legends, and flat out lies we've accumulated from popular TV shows, mass market books, nagging parents, and other people's limiting beliefs.
Mm.
Today, we're going to uncover the realities hiding behind popular myths, misconceptions, and limiting beliefs about decluttering and organizing our stuff.
And we're going to start by addressing the myths and misconceptions that plague our audience. We posted a survey this week, so let's start by talking about your responses. You guys came in with some great answers. First, we asked our audience to describe a popular myth or misconception about clutter or organizing that you have believed in the past, but have now come to see as incorrect. And who or what changed your mind about this idea?
Okay,
You guys
Jean,
brought it.
they did. We have some great stuff. Jean said, "I don't need to declutter. I just need to get organized."
Oh. So this is a perfect one to start with because this is where everybody starts. They look at their house and they think, what I need is more containers and labels. Surely if I add containers and labels, then it will all fit and it will all be organized. Not realizing that putting the stuff in the container doesn't make it smaller. Doesn't make the stuff that you're containing take up less space. So it is sort of this imaginary idea of physics that somehow if you put it all in a box that will shrink how it fits and make it fit better. What you're really doing is adding containers and creating the ability to fill your house in 3D. Like instead of just dealing with the floors and the walls, you're building it up so that you can stack boxes on top of themselves inside closets, inside rooms, and you are just sort of filling the entire cubic capacity of the room instead. And so that is definitely a myth. Yes, containing things helps and labeling things help. But there was an episode of Law and Order of all things that right. And I have this picture in my mind. It was an episode about a woman who was a hoarder who was hiding a child from the rest of the family. And she was hiding them in a room that was blocked off by stacks of boxes in her hoarded home. And every box was a time capsule. And so she would have that box and all the things from a specific time period would go in that box and get stacked. That's the extreme version in my mind of adding containers, making it better. You will surrender footprint to the boxes, the containers that you add. You will be able to stack them and it'll make the ones on the bottom harder to get to. You'll be able to label it, but it's still not going to be easily accessible without you undoing the stacks of containers you're adding. And so that's everybody's wishful thinking on
And
organizing. If you could just organize it all, it'll fit and it'll be fine. And you don't really have to declutter. It's like, yeah, because then you just end up organizing stuff that you don't want, and you end up organizing trash, and you end up organizing papers that you don't need. And that is 100% a myth. And decluttering is always step one. That's what I'm saying.
well, and we've had audience members quote another organizer, and I have at this moment forgotten which one. I can't remember if it's the Minimal Mom or Dana K. White or someone else who says you can't organize clutter. It's
Right?
um
You just
M said
contain it.
M commented, "My mother taught me that it is okay to keep stuff if you can figure out how to cram it into the storage space."
Yeah, no. Another myth, right?
Oh,
Because it's just going to cost you.
Pat says that I think that was Fly Lady, and
Oh,
that
flight
actually sounds
lady.
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
hmm
yeah. Great.
Okay, let's go on. Deb said, if it's packed away in a cupboard or shed and can't be seen, it's not clutter.
Yes, it is too. It's just hidden clutter. And that's really an offshoot of the previous comment. If you manage to pack it away in the cupboard or the shed, or you've a storage unit that's separate from your house, or you shoved it in the garage or the attic, it's still clutter. And if you imagine that all that stuff that's hidden has to come out because you're moving out of the house, guess what? You're going to be throwing away half of what you're pulling out. So I get it that it's hidden, and so that it's not quite as obvious that it's there, but it doesn't change the fact that you don't remember what's in there, and when you pull it out, it's going to be a total and complete surprise to you and everyone around you what comes out of there. And I have clients that do this where they take every drawer and they Tetris it so that they can cram as much in there as possible and fill the cubic volume of the drawer or the cabinet. But the problem with that is once you've made it into a block of stuff, then you can't actually use the stuff. You can only know that it's in there somewhere, and you have to undo the Tetris in order to find something, and then you have to Tetris it back. I remember a client who she liked to cook, and she particularly liked to make some specific. She did a whole croissant thing at Christmas time where she would make these brilliant, layered, beautiful chocolate croissants. But she
Hmm.
made them by the hundreds. She would make a million of them. And so she'd have like 15 cookie sheets going and, huge volume for this once a year event. And then they all had to be stored. And she was so mad that her husband would not restack the 15 mixing bowls in the correct order to fit into the drawer. And I'm like, that's your system for cramming that drawer full. But it's a big barrier to entry for anybody else that doesn't know your stacking system and your arrangement of the drawer, and B, who doesn't want to spend the time making the 15 bowls work correctly. And
Right.
so it was one where she was sort of trapped by her own, like she had Tetris the kitchen to hold all the stuff, but it only fit one specific way, and you better know the way or you're never getting it back in. And so she made it really hard for anybody else to do anything in her kitchen. And she was mad a lot because people didn't put things away where she wanted it to go.
We have frequently given our definition of clutter as anything that gets in the way of having or being or doing the things you really want to have, be, or do. And
Mm-hmm.
so anything that you're keeping, but it's stored away so painstakingly and with such care and effort, you're
Mm-hmm.
costing yourself time and you're costing yourself energy to hang on to something. And if you're not, well, obviously, if it's stored away in Tetris fashion, you're not using it regularly,
Mm.
almost certainly,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Or it takes, an act of Congress to get it out of the cabinet.
right.
And in the process, you're pulling all this other stuff and making chaos around you to get to the one thing. And then you have to stop and put all the chaos back to keep moving forward. It just creates a lot of work to get to an object that you want to use. And so yeah, it's a lot of time.
Okay, let's have another myth. Brienne says, I used to think that decluttering would make my house stay organized. I now know that if I don't spend time tidying it every day, it can get as messy as ever, even having done a considerable amount of decluttering.
Absolutely. There's always stage two, and stage two is the maintenance phase because you are still living in the house, right? The idea that you would declutter and then your house would stay static, even though you're still walking around it and living your life and making meals and getting dressed and having friends over and taking in the mail. The idea that that would magically not continue to cause clutter, even though it had caused clutter all along, is unrealistic. Of course, you're going to have to then maintain it. The trick is for you to go through the process of decluttering it and getting it down to a manageable amount so that maintaining it isn't a constant horrible chore. It's something that you can do relatively easily and you don't have too much stuff to manage.
Okay, Teresa, this is a really good one. I'm curious how many people in our audience have experienced this one. I thought I'd get decluttered and organized after I retired, but I don't have the energy I used to.
Isn't that the truth? I'm sure there's lots of people in the audience that can relate to that. And it is a process of I can deal with this project later because the myth is when you retire, you're suddenly going to have all this free time. So I get it that you are going to have free time and that you're not going to go to work, but you're also going to be like, woohoo, I'm free now. Let's travel with my friends. Let's, go to play games. Let's like all of the things that you wanted to do and have fun. Let's see my family, whatever, all those things that you've saved up to do in retirement are going to be way more fun than organizing. And so a lot of people get to that stage and they think, I'm going to retire and I'm going to have all this free time and then I'm going to start decluttering. And what really happens is they start having all the fun that they also plan to have in retirement. And decluttering never comes to the top of the list because, that's not given a choice. Who's going to go, should I go have coffee and lunch with my friends or should I declutter the house? Let's see. What are you going to choose? You're always going to choose the fun. And so it is something that your energy is more limited and the demands on your time in retirement are all about entertainment that you haven't been able to have, fun that you haven't been able to do, places you haven't been able to go because you've been working for a living. And now you've arrived at the time where you can go and do all those things. And so, yeah, decluttering goes at the bottom of the list. I think that idea that you're going to organize when you retire is a stalling tactic. It's a way for you to go, yeah, yeah, I'll have free time then. And I'll have a big block of free time, and therefore it will make it all easy, right? It's just a stalling tactic.
Okay,
Sorry.
Millie mentioned the myth that my stuff is valuable. And she says, if you believe that, visit your local thrift store.
Right? That's a perfect thing to do. Like I hadn't thought to tell people to do that, but what a great idea. Go into a resale store and look at the stuff that's in there and see what the prices are on them. And you can see that something that has, it's been on the floor and it's got a price on it that is something that's really collectible, for instance, it's been on the floor and it sells within the week, but the price that it's at is 20% of what it was originally purchased for. And maybe it's super popular and therefore it goes out the door, but it still went out the door at 20% of what you paid for it. And you're giving part of it, the money, to the thrift store because they are the ones running and operating the storefront and spending all the money to have the store available for people to walk by and see the thing. And so you get your cut. It's never going to be the money that you spent for it originally. And I think that the idea of going into a thrift store and looking for your kinds of items, the things that you think are valuable, and seeing the price tags on them, those price tags reflect the reality of the resale store. They put prices on it based on their vast and repeat experience of what sells and what isn't selling. And so you're seeing, hey, the market price for this item right now is X. And if it doesn't sell at that, then they mark the price down the next month, and then they mark it down again the next month. And then, maybe it won't sell even with all those discounts, and then it goes out to donation. So the idea of checking your value, what you think is valuable in your head against similar items in the thrift store will show you, yeah, that's a myth.
Well, and the idea that my stuff is valuable, we've talked about this in previous shows on the subject of organizing myths and misconceptions. This one has a formal psychological name, which is the endowment effect. We've talked
Yes.
about it before, so I'm not going to say much other than human beings have a tendency to attribute extra value to things just because they're in our possession.
Because we own it, and that
Yeah,
makes we endow it with more value because it's ours, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Rowan mentions, and the thrift stores have to mark up to cover their costs, so they're putting the value that they think they can get for it, right off the bat.
Right.
To me, thrift stores to me always feel like a cautionary tale. We on a trip down to look for junk at resale shops and such down in North Georgia, we stopped at this place that is a typical size thrift store, three or four connected rooms with packed to the rafters with stuff.
Right.
Except then you can go up the stairs and go through this other door that goes into a space that, I kid you not, is like an airplane hangar.
Oh my gosh.
And
Wow.
I walk in there and I'm like, no, no, no. I can't even start. I don't even want to start. It's
It's too
overwhelming.
overwhelming, right?
It's so overwhelming, and I look at it and I just think, look at all this crap, pardon my French.
Right.
So much, mm, you know, decades and decades of cheap consumer goods and
All laid out.
all laid out and piled up. It is definitely a very it's a sort of humbling way to get a reminder that, yeah, my stuff, it's not that valuable, really.
Well, and a reminder that you have 25 items, but your 25 items are a drop in the bucket of all the things that are out there trying to be resold right now, right?
Right.
Like there's an airplane hangar full of things that used to be other people's valuable stuff that's
Yeah.
all sitting in there waiting for somebody to take it home. There's not as many people trying to pick it up as people trying to drop it off. And so it's a much bigger, your stuff may be valuable in your mind, but it's it's a little drop in the ocean of stuff that's out there on the river of stuff trying to relocate there.
Um, Okay, next myth, and this is related. Christine says, "My own relatives will want my valuable, in quotation marks, stuff."
Yeah, have you asked them lately? It is there is a story in the survey, and I don't know if we quote it or not, but there's a story in the survey about somebody is trying to move, and so they've been offering specific pieces of furniture and stuff to relatives, and they keep offering and they keep offering, and now and the people keep saying no, and now the relatives are irritated with her for having continue to push it on them, and she's surprised to find that yeah, it's her stuff that she thinks is great, and the family that she thought would want it really doesn't, and to the point where they're mad at her how hard she's pushed about it now. And so you think that your family's going to want it, but they really probably won't. They might want a random one or two things. Remember that film that we watched that was like 20 minutes from that was out of the New York area, and her mother died and they had to clear out the apartment, and her brother came to help clear out the apartment, and the brother took a shell. Like he took a conch shell out of the house, out of the apartment, and that was the only thing he wanted out of the whole house. It's like, yeah. And so she ended up with all these boxes being delivered to her little apartment, and she was drowning in the stuff that she couldn't release from her mother.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, most of your relatives are going to be like the brother. They're going to come and want one or two things, and that's going to be it. And so your volume of things is not going to be relocated to the other family members.
yeah. Your things are the props from your life, and so
Ooh, good description.
other, your family members may recognize, oh yeah, she always liked this fill in the blank. So
Mm,
I'll take that and it will always remind me of her. But that's all they need. I mean, they don't even need that much, but they're willing to take that
yeah, yeah.
much.
They're going to take a little slice of the pie, a
Yeah.
little slice of the pie.
Naomi
Absolutely.
says, Naomi says, pitfall when you ask your kids if they want your stuff. How old do the kids have to be before you stop thinking that they will change their minds when they are older?
So I get the inclination, because when you ask a teenager, they're like, ah, right? And when you ask a young adult, somebody in their 20s, maybe in their 30s, and you think, oh, they just haven't settled down yet, they don't have a house yet. But the truth is, like Ed just said, your lifestyle and your objects reflect how you lived your life and what you found interesting and what colors you liked and what styles you liked. And it's not going to be the same. So you may get lucky and one of your kids has a similar style to you, and meaning that they'll take some of your stuff. But if they move out and start living their life and they don't come back to you and say, hey, mom, can I have this blah, blah, blah for my apartment? They're not going to suddenly change their style drastically and come to you later and say, oh, now I love all this antique furniture that you have from grandma and I'm desperate to have it all. Like, it's not going to happen.
Well, and about the only common exception that you see to that, I think, is, sometimes someone will later on in life take an interest in the family memorabilia. Someone, might
Mm,
get to 40
the
or
genealogy
50 before they
stuff.
suddenly realize, yeah, I want to know where our family came from. I want to see the old photos. But
But that's not
but not
not I'm going to take all
that's
the things out of your house.
right. I'm not going to take all the decorations that you found appealing in 1973.
Right? Right. Yeah, that's the thing. And if you are someone who doesn't change your surroundings, doesn't redo your style, you don't redecorate every so often. If you're not that person, if you set it up and then you've left it for decades, your kids are not going to suddenly think that that layout and style is a good idea 50 years later. It's just going to get dismantled. And they may, like I said, they may take a little slice of the pie and incorporate it into their style and their layout, but they're not going to wholesale pick up your house and go park it somewhere else for another 10 years. It's not going to happen.
Right.
And yeah, keep on dreaming.
except in the rare case where you have a kid who is very nostalgic about the way they grew up, and so they'll happily take it all. But that's
And put it in a
that's
storage unit because it won't fit in
right.
their house.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, Catherine mentioned a couple of different misconceptions. She said shifting items around the house would solve the problems. And number two, I needed to find more products to store things better. Neither worked.
Right? They don't. Shifting things around is that whole, I pick it up, I walk in another room, put it somewhere else. It doesn't change the volume that's in the house. It just changes where the volume is, and it's an attempt to wedge it in tighter or better. And that really doesn't solve the problem. You're correct. And we said this earlier, I need more products to store things better. So adding some products to store things more effectively is true, but you still have to thin the contents. You still have to thin the herd in order to really make a difference. And, you know, we've been saying that for years.
Amanda commented that nostalgic kid will wind up in this audience in 10 to 20 years.
You are correct. From your mouth to God's ears. Yes, that person will come and try to get some help, hopefully.
Do you think we'll still be doing this webcast when we're 80?
Yeah, I guess they're not. I'm pretty sure they will have decided that we don't have anything relative to say anymore, and that will be the end of that.
Diz says, when my son got married, they needed dishes. So I gave them my favorite 12-piece set. Then 3 weeks later, I discovered they had a cheap new Target set and had gotten rid of mine.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Because you thought that they needed those dishes and they thought they wanted something new. And so you went and solved their problem so they didn't have to spend money, but it was not the goal that they had. The goal they had was we're in this new house and we want to buy something that we like. And it isn't just about using what is costs us nothing and we don't like the look of it. And so sorry. I mean, I think that that's a perfect example of it was your favorite because it was your style and it was your, when you got it, it met your needs and it was the look that you liked and it went with how you were entertaining and it solved a bunch of problems for you and it appealed to you in stylistic way and expecting that to work for them, you know, several years later, several decades later, now you have kids and they're grown and yeah, it's not a realistic expectation that they're going to have the same style and desire for what they need that you had. And that was a perfect example of it worked for you, didn't work for them.
Well,
And you probably didn't ask them. They probably didn't feel comfortable free plates or free plates, but they probably didn't feel comfortable saying, no, thank you, mother, this isn't our style. They probably
well,
felt bad.
they also, there also may be an element of, we're newlyweds, and so we're working on building our life together. And so
Mm-hmm.
the thing we both went to Target and picked out together,
Yeah, it was a couple thing. It was a couple experience.
these are our dishes. These are not mom's old dishes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know?
Yeah, that one person remembers and the other person doesn't, right? Like that's
Right.
totally, yeah,
Yeah. It's
absolutely.
you can almost see how like using something that you from your parents could be a little alienating element in the fresh new young relationship, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And
Okay, I want to
also
uh
feeling a little bit like I'm still a kid and I have to use mom's dishes.
right.
Like that feels like I'm going off to college
Yeah.
and I'm just using what comes out of the house. And so, yeah, there you go.
So I want to move on to the other survey question.
Okay.
We asked our audience to describe a limiting belief about clutter or organizing that negatively affects your ability or willingness to address your home organization issues. This may be a belief that you inherited, picked up from popular culture, received from friends or family, or came up with all on your own. So we're going to unpack some of your answers. An anonymous respondent said, if I can't finish this decluttering project in the time I have right now, I should wait to start it until I have all the time it would take to finish it.
Yeah, that never happens. You never have all the time that you need right now, or it happens so infrequently that it could take years before you could arrive to that moment where you have all the time that you need. I think a specific project, declutter the drawer, declutter the bathroom cabinet, declutter the table, you can probably say, I have enough time to do that and do it. But if you are talking about I have to declutter this room, I have to declutter this house, then the idea of waiting until you have, 2 weeks to make it happen is it's not realistic. And the idea of you having that 2 weeks to do it and then actually doing it without stopping for 2 weeks is also unrealistic because you won't find that fun and you will not want to stay on top of it. You will not want to keep doing it continuously every day for 2 weeks trying to get to the end. And so you do need to have a slot of time that you can stay focused and you're willing to work and that you can accomplish some part, some step. I want to pull everything out of the drawer and sort it. I want to go through the sorted drawer and discard things that I don't need. There's always time for a step or two, and aiming to move the project along by a few steps is really where you're trying to get instead of I'm waiting for that big chunk of time when I'm going to be willing to spend 2 weeks on the project and then I'm going to actually spend 2 weeks on the project. And if you think about it, how unlikely is it that those two things are going to happen all at once? And suddenly you're going to come up with all this energy to work nonstop to declutter the house in this imaginary window of time you come up with. So, yeah, no, you got to do it in pieces and not wait for the right amount of time to get started.
Connie comments, I have that battle with my DH. If I counter with even 15 minutes will help, he says that is pointless.
Yeah. So I think don't declutter with him. And I would do it around him. I would go and do 15 minutes on something that is yours to do, or work on the mail, or work on the files, or work on whatever. Like a lot of people believe what they believe so intensely, they cannot let go of it logically with discussion. They can only see the difference when they see it being done a different way. So I would stop trying to enroll him. Clearly, he's anchored in that belief and go about your business on something that you can work on. If you're in charge of the kitchen, if you're some part of your office, you're part of the closet, you're part of the bedroom, you work on projects of your own and do it in those small increments a little bit at a time and let him watch the slow growth of you string a bunch of small steps together and you end up at the other end somewhere completely differently. And he can see the difference because you have slowly put together those 15 minutes. I know that part of this is you're wanting his buy-in and his help and support in doing the house so that it's equally a chore of both of yours. And I think right now your styles are too divergent for that to be true. So let him declutter in big chunks when he wants, and you work on your stuff and see if you can't change his mind by showing an example of how your process works.
Yeah, because my bet is that the big chunks of time never
Never
materialize
come,
for
right?
him, right?
Yeah. Or he does it and then he finally convinces himself to give up a whole weekend to work in the office or something. And then he is miserable by the end of Sunday night. He is so unhappy because he spent the whole weekend beating himself to stay focused on this project all weekend long in his big chunk of time. And so, you can show him, well, you can continue to suffer in big chunks of time, or we can do it this way and still get to the end result.
Yeah. I suppose you could also, if this was the early on in the relationship, you could also maybe push back a little and say, okay, so if 15 minutes isn't enough for us to make a difference, how much would be enough for us to make a difference? And when can I get on your calendar?
Right?
You know?
When are you willing to spend an hour or 2 hours, and
Yeah.
let's block it out. Yep.
Ginger mentioned a similar or kind of related limiting belief. She said hers is, I need to wait until I have a block of good energy time. Decluttering that room is going to overwhelm me with decisions to make and take too long. I'll just make a bigger mess, become frustrated, and give up. She goes on to say, I fight this line of thinking often. When I'm thinking clearly, I assess the project, determine what I'm dealing with, and take a few pics. Then I take a few minutes to look at the pics with arm length perspective to list next steps and make decisions about where it goes. Next, I can go straight to the room and immediately take actions. The decisions are pre-made, so it's faster. And if I need to pause, I can return to my checklist after a break.
I like your strategy that you look at a picture and plan first. Even this is something that you can do in stages. You don't need a big block of good energy. So you can do a step or two of the plan when you have low energy to keep moving forward. The idea of taking the picture and walking away from the room and looking at the picture gives you that moment of detachment so that the project is not as overwhelming, and you can look at it and say, oh, I need to move this there, and I need to move this there, and I need to take that in the other room or whatever. You can give yourself a list of things to do. And then if you don't have a lot of energy, you can go do a couple of them and come back the next time and do a couple more. Like, the pictures aren't going to change and the room isn't going to change in the meantime. So you can definitely do that, just like we were talking about the 15 minutes at a time. If you don't have good energy, you can take the pictures, make a list of things to do, and stop, come back the next day, do a couple of them, stop, and you can keep moving the projects forward in small pieces. Exactly. Exactly the way we described earlier. And it will still work. I think that the looking at the pictures of the room is a great way to detach yourself a little bit from the overwhelm and give you the ability to sit down on the couch and look at the pictures. And it's sort of like looking at the TV or a magazine. You're looking through, and it's not exactly the same as standing directly in front of the actual room trying to figure out what to do with it. And so I think that's a great interim step to help you plan and prevent overwhelm while you're looking at the whole full room. Good job.
Okay, Cynthia's limiting belief is that once I give something away that has sentimental significance, I will never get it back, and someone, kids, might wish that they had that item.
I get it. You feel sentimental about it and you let it go, and then you're worried that you'll freak out about it. I understand. And kids might wish that they had something. You can alleviate that a little bit by asking the kids. It's hard for you to gauge what they're going to feel sentimental about. You have your own memories about the stuff, and you remember different things than your kids remember around the item. And so it's important to ask them, not, do you feel sentimental about this thing? What do you feel sentimental about? And let them tell you what those items are that they feel attached to, that they have sentiment around. You will be surprised almost every time. Every time that I've asked a client to do this, to contact their kids and say, do I feel sentimental about this thing. Do you feel sentimental about it? Or which things do you feel sentimental about? Can you tell me what things you might potentially want to keep for keepsakes reasons? And the list that comes back, the items that people say, Mom, do you still have the fill in the blank doll, the fill in the blank pillow, the fill in the blank tablecloth that grandma used, that daddy got me, that whatever? You will be amazed at the things that they remember. You were fully present and an adult when they were little kids. You have much better recorded memories of that time than they do. And so little kids' memories aren't up to snuff when they're young. You don't record in the same way when you're little. Your brain's still developing. So there's going to be things that they feel sentimental about that you won't even remember or will have completely forgotten about. And there will be things that the little kid was super attached to when they were little, and now you have those memories because you record them as an adult. And they, as an adult, don't have the memory of them being a little kid and being really attached to that little stuffed doll. So you really have to ask them what they feel sentimental about. And based on their answers, then you can give things away, knowing that they didn't even remember the thing that you were worried about. And it really didn't matter to them after all. And the things that you feel sentimental about, you can ask yourself, I feel sentimental about this because of my mother, but is this the best representative sample of something that my mother gave me, that my mother had, that my mother used? Is this the most valuable one? And if it's not, if you have something that's better, that's more emotionally rich around your mother than the thing you're trying to give away, you likely won't be worried about giving it away after all. And I think there's an experience that you have to go through of hesitating about giving something away, giving it away, and waiting to see what your emotional response is a week later, 2 weeks later. Most of the time, people find that when they don't actually have it, the endowment effect fades, and then it's not as important to them as they thought. And they feel released from the burden. So you do have to have that experience a few times of, okay, I really don't need this. I feel sentimental about it. Can I let go of it? And you let go of something and see how your life, how it comes up in your mind, what you feel about it later. Don't do it with something that you're very, very, very attached to. Do it with something that you're on the fence about. Oh, I like this. Anything that you are hesitant about, mildly hesitant about. Give those things away and see what it's like. Don't start with one that feels like it's, will wrench your heart out if you give it up. That's not the stuff we're trying to get rid of. We're trying to get rid of the stuff that you feel a little sentimental about, but you can talk yourself into releasing it into the wild.
Well, and I don't know if it was in the survey responses or in the chat very early on mentioned the idea of putting something into the donation box or bag or bin and then not taking it away immediately, but like
Mm,
writing an maybe putting something on your calendar for a week from now or a month from now, take that box to donation. And if you haven't taken out the thing that you're on the fence about, it can go because you
right.
haven't, yeah,
Give it a little time to marinate,
to get, or
not
yeah.
in its place where it's been hiding all this time. When it becomes part of the landscape, when it becomes a permanent part of the decoration or a permanent part of the closet, and you're used to it being there, when you remove it, it feels sort of shocking. But if you can remove it and go put it someplace else in a box, in a bin, out of the way, that expectation that it's there suddenly, I mean, slowly will fade away. And so sometimes you just have to get used to the idea that it's been removed. And if you can do that, and then a month goes by and you're like, oh, I'm okay, I'm used to this now, then you can calmly go and take the item and give it away after all.
Connie says we call it the corner of contemplation.
That's a great name. I love it. I want to use that. The corner of contemplation. Let us contemplate it in the corner over there. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Okay, let me, here's one I really want to get to. Evelyn says, here's her limiting belief. I never use it, but if I get rid of it now, then I will need it in 2 weeks. I need all this stuff to survive.
Do you need this stuff to survive, or do you need this stuff to fend off some imaginary and probably relatively minor inconvenience down the road? I know people get worried about it's expensive to replace it. What if I need it? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the truth is, you probably have something else in the house that will suffice. You probably have a way to work around it. You are a grown adult and you have creativity and ideas, and you can come up with something else. If you don't have this thing, you can try something else. Or you can go borrow that thing from a friend if you absolutely have to have that thing and you've given it away. But I think the likelihood that that is true is pretty low. And none of these things are really about survival, right? It isn't
Right.
that your existence is going to be threatened because you don't have a melon baller. It's not going to be. there.
Yeah.
You can scoop melon some other way, and maybe it won't make the pretty balls that you used to use the melon baller for, but it'll be fine. And does it mean that you can't eat the melon? No, it does not. Does that mean you're going to starve to death? No, it does not. So it is a panic that what if I need it and I'm going to need it? And I've had people say I gave it away and then I suddenly need it. It's like, you remembered that you had that option to solve the problem.
Right.
And that's the one that you is top of mind because you just gave it away. But the
Right.
truth is there's always another way to solve the problem. So you are not thwarted.
I'm suddenly wishing that I'd come up with a tittle based on this particular comment, because I
Ah,
think, and maybe this can be an alternative tittle for anyone who
right, right,
didn't
right.
like the tittle we're actually going to give you. And so the alternative assignment is, think of something in your home that you can't live without, and then spend a few minutes figuring out how you would manage to live without it.
There you go.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we
Exactly.
are just about out of time, and we need to talk about next week. We're
Okay.
going to be back next week at the usual time, and a reminder to our audience in places where the time will be changing this weekend. Our show will be an hour earlier than you are used to. I hope I have that right. I always get so confused about the time change.
I know, right?
But we don't change our time in the United States till next weekend. So next week's show will be 1 hour out of sync with the normal time. Oh, Lorraine says hour behind.
Well, so if you are in Europe and you're changing this week, figure it out.
Sort it
Pay
out, because
attention.
we will still be at noon Central Daylight Time. And
Right.
so
Yeah, yeah. And we will have not shifted our time yet. So make sure you pay attention so you don't miss something.
and what we're gonna talk about next week is all the things that your clutter is standing in the way of. And watch your email for an announcement of that. We're calling that this you minus your stuff. Visualize and create a less cluttered life.
And we're going to send out a survey because we want to hear your commentary on that as well. So watch for the survey, please.
I know that it's fall back, but what confuses me is, so when Europe falls back, we're still sprung forward. So that is why I think our show will be an hour earlier to people who have already fallen back. Does that make sense? Connie, help me with this, because Connie gets it.
I'm lost. I'm
I know,
lost.
right? Right, right?
Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah. Connie says yes. Time-wise, we are closer.
Okay. While one of us is shifted and one of us isn't.
While we remain sprung forward and everyone else has fallen back.
Yes.
Okay, Gail, give us the tittle.
Okay. This week's assignment is called Create Your Own Legend. We want you to dream up a positive story to replace some of the misconceptions and limiting beliefs echoing around inside your head. So set aside a few minutes to reflect on what you're hoping to accomplish with your decluttering and organizing projects. Imagine how your life will be different in your beautiful, clear, decluttered, organized space. And now write a few sentences about the way that you'll enjoy your home in its ideal condition. What new activities will you try? What hobbies, art forms, or entertainments will you bring back into your life? And if writing isn't your jam, then you can make a drawing, a painting, a collage, anything to express or illustrate what your organized life will be like. And then come back and tell us about it next week.
Okay, if you're watching this on YouTube, we would love for you to join us live. To get notifications about upcoming events, we invite you to join the meetup group by visiting cfhou.com/meetup. You can also follow us on Facebook by visiting cfhou.com/Facebook, or join our mailing list by visiting cfhou.com/subscribe. We love to hear from our audience, so please keep your questions, comments, and topic suggestions coming on YouTube, Facebook, or anywhere that you find us. You can always reach us through the website at clutterfairyhouston.com.
Thanks everybody for joining us this week. We're always happy to hear from you, and we really appreciate that you participate in the survey so well. We always get so many answers, and it's great material for perfect examples of here's how somebody's living their real life, and this is their real experience. and everybody gets enriched when we share examples of things that people can relate to because it's happening to you, and you can understand that it's happening to them in the same way. So really appreciate that you do the surveys. Thank you so much. And come back and see us next week. We'll be here. Bye.
Bye-bye.